What's up, Ham Fam? Welcome back to another episode of Heart as a Mother. Before we get started, we'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples of Treaty 7 region and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continue to enrich our community today. So it's been a while. Thank you so much for joining us, you guys. It's me, your host, Giselle, and as always, joined by my lovely co-host, Harleen.
Hey guys. Anyways, wow. It's been kind of a minute, longer than a minute. But we're definitely excited to come back and record our first recording on 2022. And a lot of you guys are probably wondering, WTF, like, why are we doing on Zoom? Why are we doing all these things? So Giselle and I are wanting to try something a little bit different, but also probably a lot of you guys are wondering why the long ass hiatus. So let us just tell you that life fucking happens. It just does, right? And as moms, we go on autopilot and we try to figure out our shit, and we're trying to do this and do that and do this. And as I'm always trying to navigate, and Giselle and most moms who's trying to autopilot, you just start to sink. And that's what it felt like. There was a lot of shit in the back end, just personally, with that we needed to look after, because if we didn't, it would just go in the back burner, and things would just, and let's just be honest, like, we actually did have mom burnout all year long, even including with the pandemic. We just needed to take care of ourselves, take care of our families, and really go back to our grassroots. And this is the reason why we took a long hiatus, to make sure that the content we're giving you guys is still authentic and true. And we're just doing it in a different format. So stay tuned with our journey.
Yeah, so we're joining you from the comfort of our own homes today, but nonetheless, we are so excited to be back. For those of you who are just tuning in, we, again, are Har and Giselle, and we're creating a safe space for moms and dads, or anyone really, to share in the honesty of parenthood, while also being able to laugh at ourselves, because that is so important.
Yeah, so our today our guest is a mom of a 3-year-old and a wife to a military husband. She has her own podcast called The Necessary Break, where you join her for an hour of necessary distractions of laughs, cries, and everything in between, from adulting, culture, relationships, and confessions. Hailing all the way from Minnesota, we would like to welcome Philantha. Chuck, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but I'm terrible at it, so I'm so sorry. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You're so close.
No.
So close. I understand why the "ra" sounds so, like, feels like it flows, because it's like philanthropy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like Samantha, where it's with Phil in the front. So Philantha.
Philantha. Okay, perfect.
Look at that.
I kept practicing that, like, literally over and over, and I was like, I'm like notorious and terrible at names, so I was like, I should have just asked her before I even said her name.
I would have loved to send you a voice message, that way you can hear it as well too. Like, I do that literally all day long, and I don't mind it at all.
Well, the thing is, while we're listening to your podcast, and I'm like listening and your introduction, so I kept saying it over and over and over, and I was like, I got this, but I was like, no, for some reason I'm gonna get to where I am and I'm just gonna butcher the whole thing.
Well, thank you so much, Philantha, for joining us today, all the way from Minnesota. And it's an exciting episode, because you're our very first guest of 2022, and we couldn't have picked a better topic. I'm really excited for what we're about to talk about. So before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, and also who or what you offer to parents, and why we're kind of doing this.
Yeah, so my name is Philantha. I hail all the way from Minnesota. I kind of have a background with children since before I can even walk and talk. I've always been the go-to nanny, especially in Asian culture, where you're very collective like that. When they really say your village is your everything, like, we were the village. If anything, I was the village for everybody's kids. And that in tune turned into me being a nanny. And then for a minute decided that, maybe I wouldn't be a good mom. Maybe they wouldn't work out because I didn't really have good experiences. So even if I'm great with the kids, and even though I get these amazing compliments, maybe this wasn't a thing. And so I went into the direction of doing like IT for a while. And then I kind of kept coming back to this idea of like kids and parents and what that meaning meant. And so today I want to talk to you guys about my online parenting program, in which it's 2 parts. The first part is reparenting the mother, which is called Mother the Mother. And the second part is raising your child resilient, autonomous, and capable. And pretty much everything that you learn in the first part, you utilize all of that in order to apply it to teaching your kids. And I think that model, that hierarchy, is more sustainable in when it comes to moms of color, because we cannot just go out there and do what white women are doing and say, we're doing gentle parenting and it works. We come from so much more than having the capability to just start off at their, number one place, whereas we are always 10 steps behind because of our generational trauma. So whether you come from immigrant line, refugee line, or you've come from like a war zone or displaced place, like that's not too far ago. That's only like 2 generations before us. When you think about the Black community here, we're right alongside each other. It wasn't that long ago for them for slavery, and it wasn't that long ago for us for immigration and refugee and all of that too. So a lot of the trauma that we're living today is still ongoing. And so when you come and try to do like conscious parenting, it's everything in you is going to be like, this doesn't feel right. And this feels really wrong. Like it makes me feel better if I just yell, because that makes me feel better and everybody stays quiet. And guess what? That immediately resolved everything, but it doesn't. So that's why we're kind of here to talk about that. I want to go deeper with you guys on what the questions that you guys have with your community and really talk about it. Because I think in the idea of being a parent guide, I get asked so many questions that I think moms hide behind the screen about and would never actually have this conversation with me. And the thing is, I'm so down to earth and I'm so down for all of it, because generational trauma, there's such a variety to it. And there's so much to that when I talk about that, I'm talking about the shame and the guilt that comes with it, and then add on mom guilt, and then add on having more kids and more mom guilt, and then dealing with your own parents who have unresolved trauma. And then you yourself every day, you're getting that mom burnout that you guys talk about. How do we fix that? How do we get more time back? How do we be happier moms? How do we be like our kids more often than not? Like those are the outcomes that you get out of my parent program.
That's amazing.
So, oh my God. Speaking of, like women of color and how we parent, sometimes, Giselle and I always discuss the fact that there's things we hated, or things that I even said I wouldn't do as when I was a child, and saying, I'm not going to do this, but I'm finding that I'm actually doing it, but I subconsciously don't even know that I'm doing it to my own child. Until where you're like, oh my God, what is that? Or it's just not working for your children. Because as you know, I have a 16-year-old, Giselle has, I have so many nieces. She's 5 now. She's 5. She's going to kill me. She's like, you don't even know how old Ava is. She's 5. And we have such a big gap. But the thing is, I struggle with the fact that my son is growing up in a different generation of things that are happening around. And there's this preconceived notion also that, most Asian parents are strict, or they're put together, or their children, like there is, like even from, and this is coming from our own parents and our parents as friends. And there is a shame to the fact that, oh, your kids aren't doing that, or you're letting your kids do that. Oh, education is not important. And it's, how do I manage to still, be supportive to how my child is being brought up in this different generation versus, I don't believe with what was taught to me back then, where our parents are saying, well, you just turned out fine. But are we fine? I honestly, till this day, probably about 5-6 years ago, is where I realized that I'm actually kind of fucked up. Like it's weird to say. And I like to say that, because I'm not going to no longer sugarcoat it, because a lot of the decisions and some of the bad fucking decisions that I've made was because my fucking parents kind of fucked me up and the way that I was growing up. And the only person who's correcting that is my 16-year-old. How is that even possible that our children are correcting all this? And it's got to stop somewhere. You know, as my Jaden's dad, their parents are very not receptive to change. So how do we get our parents or all these other people on board or put our boundaries? Because sometimes they don't have fucking boundaries, and Asian culture doesn't have boundaries. You know that. So how do we do that? And when we do, if it affects the relationship we have with our parents or brothers or sisters or whatever, like, how do we navigate all that?
I love that you're bringing that up. So just like when we taught our kids, right, that if they put their hands in fire, what happens?
Ouch.
Yeah, burned.
And then what do we say to them when that's about to happen?
Stop.
Don't do
touch
that.
that.
No.
I told you so. Don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Right. So that answers the questions about relationships. There's going to be consequences to what you're putting boundaries up, and your boundaries have to stay in line with your values, and what stays true with your values of what you're teaching your kid. Parents have 80% more influence on their kids solely, aside from teachers, mentors, brothers, sisters, cousins, aunties, grandmas, grandpas, for the rest of their life. Because you are able to speak about how your parents are, and you're able to say, they fucked me up. They were like the people that were like originated to why I'm a sucky person. Because you have that correlation, your son will also have that correlation too. Like, how did my dad contribute and how did my mom contribute? And the conversation I always say with my moms is, how are you? How are you as a mom? What are your goals? What are your values? Because if you stay true to that, your whole world is going to change, because other people are going to understand that too, that you will not dismiss your values for somebody's opinion on you. And that's what it's called, consequences, right? We teach our kids consequences. It makes sense that as adults, they also have consequences. And I know this because my mom is a very guarded person when it comes to not having any boundaries. Very much that does not exist, but it cannot go the other way around. It's really one way. So as an adult, it's a lot of like, you're a mom, I'm a mom now. And I'm walking into this faith that I am going to be a great mom, and I'm going to be paving the way, just like how you had every indication of making opinions and how I shape as a person. I get to do that with my child now. And that's my last say. And having those honest conversations, because you have to realize that your parents are your parents, but they're also grown-ups too, and they made decisions on their own. And I think when you have those honest conversations to say, I see you as an adult, not just my mom, that starts the healing process of where your parenting goals can go and how it shapes the future, what your kids represent you when they grow up as well too.
Absolutely. And, you know, that goes back to the whole cultural thing where respect has always been one way. And if you challenge what your parents say, all of a sudden you're disrespecting them. But now we're living in a different generation where respect is both ways. So I'm trying to be like that with my parents, where it's like, I'm not disrespecting you by talking back. I'm just putting my boundaries up because I'm an adult. This is my life. This is my family. I have my own opinions. So it's kind of like they're getting on board slowly but surely. I mean, like, better late than never. But I think they realize that because they have no say in how they parent my child, they're kind of going into the direction of, okay, we're going to let her, actually have an opinion. And it's funny because we're talking about women of color and the way that we grew up. And I was just talking to a friend. I'm not going to say her name. I don't know if she wants me to share this, but I was just talking to a friend last week, and she was telling me like, oh yeah, I grew up very close to my parents. Like, they let me have an opinion. They were not that strict on me. And she's Vietnamese. And she's like, yeah, my husband says that I'm like a unicorn, because that's very rare in Asian culture, that, my parents and I said, I love you to each other. I say, I love you to my siblings. And I was like, girl, if I said I love you to one of my siblings, they'd be like, oh my God, are you dying? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Right. So I want to talk about the cultural divide, because obviously there is a cultural divide. Like you said in the beginning, we can't just go out there and do what white women are doing. But then there's like the unicorn, where it's the very rare case where there's an Asian parent who is an immigrant or a refugee who has these a very different relationship than most. So why do you think that is, and where do you think they got it from, as opposed to our own parents who kind of go with the old school ways?
I know exactly what you're talking about, because I've met some OG Asians where I'm like, how did you get it right? And how did my parents get it so wrong? Like, why didn't you talk to each other? Are you not at the older table too and having those conversations? Like, where did that shift in power happen for you? I just would like to say, I think there's a lot of them. I think it's just, we hear so much more of what our strict parents have always done, that becomes a status quo, that if you are the unicorn, it's almost like that's why they're the unicorn. They're kind of sitting in the background. They're kind of not doing it because they're waiting for their turn. I look at that, and I'm also want to say, like, so what I always say to my mom is, like, as much as you tell us that this isn't the way of parenting, you also know, when you like to speak so much of other people's kids, you also know how great their kids are. And then why can't you see what their parents did? Why does that feel so bad for you? Like, what part of that makes you feel like you failed as a parent? Because I still love you. And when you shape that both things can coexist, it allows them to see you as an actual adult too. And I think that's the part that us, now that we're parents, that we struggle as kids of like them being our parents, to have those conversations, because no one's ever relayed that conversation. And that's why I kind of do this work, because I am kind of the unicorn in that, to say, like, both can coexist. You can have this healthy conversation and you won't get lectured at. I promise you that. It's just going to feel scary because you've done it before. And I wanted to know also too, like, on what was being said earlier, what Harleen said, where why does it feel like we're doing all these actions that we don't even know or are conscious about, but we just do it anyway? It's because we've had almost 20 years of unconditional, like, unconscious habitual training. Like, our brains have literally been washed to believe a certain way. And so in unlearning that, it's going to take that same amount of time as well too, because you're always going to have all of those reflective triggers that are going to keep coming out at you, and it's going to take you realizing when they're happening to start being aware of it. And once you become aware of it, then you can actually start implementing some tools, because once you see it done, you can also do it as well too. So that's why a lot of my method, I do a lot of the C1 do one method, because you need to see it for yourself. You need to see that structure yourself. If you don't see that, your parents aren't going to see that either. And I think what's amazing is, like, parents forget that, like, their kids are looking to them all the time.
Yeah. And so a lot of these things, okay, so a lot of the struggles that I have, like, and I think I personally do a good job of, trying to share my feelings, but there's always times that I can't articulate, where it turns into like a stream of tears. It's not because I actually wanted to cry. It's because I really couldn't articulate at the time. Like, I'm stuttering and I'm like, and then I just cry, because I have this overwhelming sensation of, like, I don't know how to tell you how I feel, because it's like a cloud of just crap. And I'm separated with Jaden's dad, and this is the one thing that I still struggle with him, because I think a lot of his parenting styles is a bit old school, which I'm trying to just kind of get him to have an open mind. How do you think, like, most Asian like men, they are kind of like mama's boy, like, because my son is, for sure, but I always want him to see two sides of women and men, and there shouldn't be two sides. There should only be one side to coexist in how things are run. Obviously, how do you teach your child, or how do you even tell your child, where you see one parent, their parents are saying something that doesn't align with our value, but his dad still allows his parents to do it to him. And my son has explosive arguments with his father and with his grandparents, and he challenges it. I think the grandma is more receptive to it, but the dad, his grandpa, is very, very set in his own ways, to the fact that their relationship's a bit strained, and the only way that is do as I say, or you just don't get what I'm going to give you. It's always like money driven or something that is like power driven. And my son is starting to realize, like, I don't care to have this, how do you comfort or tell your kid, one way you shouldn't really disrespect him, but in another way he's being disrespected. It's almost like I am contradicting with what I'm doing with him, with his dad's. Like, how do I balance that in, still, and I understand that they have their own generational issues, but how do I, show my son, like, how do you not be disrespectful, but also stand your ground, because you shouldn't be treated that way. And the one thing, I read this book called The Conscious Parenting. Love that book. I even have a quote that I have on my phone that I read all the time, because my expectations for Jaden, my son, is not necessarily for him. You have to love him for who he's going to become and develop, not because I'm molding him. We are only guiding our kids to the path that they're going to lead into. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's the path that we want. But most of the time, as our culture, we are taught to say, this is what you need to do. Doctors, nurses, whatever it is, right? Sorry, I'm going on a tangent here.
Yeah, I was like, what's your question?
Yeah, sorry. My question is, how do I teach my son of how to be, like, how to have that boundaries with his grandparents, because he is a little bit older.
Yeah, I would say
without having to express it.
Yeah, I would say it goes back to his values. Have those honest conversations. Be like, what's respect to you? What does that look like? What would it mean if somebody respected you? What would it mean for you to give respect to somebody? I think just it doesn't need to be like, hey, we're going to sit down and have a really serious talk. Okay. It doesn't have to be like that. Just, hey, I was just thinking about what you said the other day, and I just wanted to touch back on it. I noticed the other day that you were really upset about the conversation that you had with grandpa. Are you okay? See what they say. And then it's going to follow into, it's really hard. Our culture, there's so many stigmas. Like, you're not any less of your ethnicity if you follow one way or the other. And I think that's the old way of thinking. I know that as I'm raising a biracial child, I go to her all the time, and I'm almost like, I look at her skin. She's not any less Asian. She's not any less Black. She's not any less white. Whether we celebrate Easter or we do, 𝙜𝙪𝙮𝙨, where we do like our rituals, Asian rituals, she's not any less. So why do I think I'm any less if I don't follow that? And have that conversation, call it out and say, you're really upset about that. It must have really contradicted about what you value. Let's talk about what you value, because I think that's cool that you value that. Let's talk more about that. Why does that make you feel good? By you focusing on and shifting the conversation to be positive and bringing it back on him, on what he is capable of and what he is willing to consent on, that's the boundary line. You asked about what is the difference from like respect, and maybe you should just kind of like not say anything, because maybe that's better than not saying anything at all.
Yeah.
It's the consent. Does he feel comfortable in that room? And it doesn't have to be, you need to argue with your grandpa all the time, but just to say, I'm not comfortable having this conversation. I'm going to remove myself. If you continue having this conversation, that's okay. You can say it. I will give you my listening ear, but I'm not going to have anything else to say to this conversation. Giving him those tools to how to communicate with that, your grandpa will get it. He'll be like, okay, well, I still get to talk. I'm still going to give you the lecture that I intended to give you this lecture for 45 minutes because I'm pissed off and I don't know how to deal with my own emotions.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not for your son to carry. That's not for your son to have to receive. That's not something your son has to make any actions on. It's up to him if he wants to give that space to listen. Just because you listen to somebody doesn't mean that you agree with them.
Yeah.
And there's lots of ways to de-escalate that situation than just arguing your same point back. Because if he is set in his ways, he just wants somebody to listen. He's, like he's not really looking to change his ways at that point. He's probably, that's the only way for him to connect with his grandson. And because they don't have those words, let them be. Let them be very okay with their lectures. Let them be okay with whatever their boundaries are. And all that your son has to do is choose whether to participate or not. And participation can look like listening and really being like, all right, I got like 15 more minutes for you to keep doing this, and then I'm going to go do something else. And he doesn't even need to talk about that with his dad to say, I didn't really like what grandpa had to say. He can himself be like, I didn't like that conversation, so I just sat there. I personally didn't like my emotions, so I'm going to go figure out what to do with it. And your responsibility is if he's still really upset about it and he's still mentioning about it, which means he's still like, that means it's your turn as a mom to do the mom thing, turn on the mom power and give him that space to just vent. A lot of us would just want to be listened to. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean that he needs something from you or that you need to fix a situation or that he's not in the right mind space or that you're not leading him to the right way. Because he didn't have that space with grandpa to have his own emotions, if anything, it's your role to come back to that and say, how are you doing? How does that feel? Like, how did you feel about that? Like, just get him to open up and give him that safe space to retreat to is your role as a parent. That is solving the problem there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that, like, just sitting here and talking to you, and after listening to your podcast, I really admire how self-aware you are as a mom and how confident you are in your parenting style. Like, Har and I both have breakdowns where it's like, oh my God, I yelled today, and we got into this huge fight, blah blah. And I know I always call her crying, or I vent to my fiance and I say, I always said I wasn't going to do this, but I did it. And now she's going to hate me. And I have this thing in the back of my mind where I'm just like, my biggest goal as a parent is to not fuck up my daughter. Right. So like, we started this podcast because we want to be more confident in that. Right. And hopefully one day have the same kind of confidence you have. So I wanted to kind of go back, take a step back and ask you, like, what kind of household did you grow up in that you decided this is the kind of thing that you wanted to do for your own family? And how did you build that confidence for yourself, knowing that this all stemmed from your trauma?
Well, first off, thank you for your kind words. The confidence that I exude, honestly, this is why I have the parenting program. I personally was like, it's not fair that I'm the only relaxed, calm, competent mom in the room. Like, it's so weird to me that I'm not freaking out because my kid's having a tantrum. I'm not freaking out because they're crying in the back seat for 20 minutes. Like, it's really weird to be on the other side and say, I'm not struggling with that. And I don't feel like a shit mom because I know I'm not a shit mom. And I know I yelled and then I apologize. Like, I think it's about having the education and then having the tools and then willing to always be on the receiving end and stay a student about it. I read so many books about conscious parenting, and then I use my own analysis of what it means to be a Hmong American woman and say, okay, what part is more in alignment with my values as a Hmong woman, and what part of it is just culturally like old stemming of ways that just doesn't make sense, and then what actually makes sense, what is the science behind it, and how do I apply it? And I think when I'm calm, I'm cool, I'm collected, and I'm happy, I parent better. And I kind of put a lot of those tools in my parent program because I think parents just forget and they get really in their heads about like their own intrusive thoughts about like how shitty they are. And that all really stems from like shame and conditional shaming, which means someone told you were shit for a really long time and you believed it. And so now that you're your own parent, you're like, I don't want to fuck them up because I'm scared of myself. That's what you're telling yourself. How does that make you feel better? It doesn't. So it continues the cycle of torture that you give yourself, that why you don't feel like you can be as confident as I am. I don't go through the cycle of shame. I don't go through the cycle of torturing myself anymore, because I realize how energy consuming that is. That is so exhausting, to tell myself how shitty of a person I am, when I also know my kid is happy within 2 seconds, and I don't ever have to buy her love. I don't ever need to reach for her love. I don't ever have to question where that's going to come from. And she's shown me that over and over again. So why do I keep telling myself that every time she shows me love, that I'm a shit mom? Like, that is a horrible emotional toll cycle that I put on myself. Like, who taught me that narrative? My mom. And then who kept continuing that cycle after I moved out of her house? Me. I did that. So if I can tell myself these shitty things about myself, I can also tell me all these amazing things about myself. It's gonna be hard as hell to tell myself I'm beautiful and I'm amazing. But if I just keep saying it, it's gonna happen, right? Yeah, because that's what happened to the idea of you being taught that you're a shit person as well too. Does that make sense?
You realize you just summed up like all my therapy sessions in the past like 30 seconds
I
for
always
free.
told you this. I can't take my own advice, but I always tell Giselle this because she's always fearful of it. And I have to tell her, I was like, listen, this little girl you're raising, she doesn't even fucking care what you yelled about the other day, or what you just yelled at or was mad about something. I was like, she just remembers like the costume you fucking built her that was so elaborate that you stayed up all night. And I don't know. And here's what the question that I'm going to ask is, do you think that it's other moms that shame other moms because people put this fucking persona? Because I do have friends that are like, I loved it when I was so pregnant and everything was so perfect. I was like, yeah, that's fucking wonderful. I didn't have the best experience. I always just feel like I have some friends, or I know of people, or, people that I've met in passing that doesn't really, like, they kind of disregard like my experience versus what theirs are. Like, our experiences are always different. But also it's almost like they're minimalizing your hardships because they're not going through that. Do you think that's like a thing, or is that just me being fucking over analyzing everything that I'm doing? But I really feel like, do moms do it? Do we do it to other moms and other women?
Women, we learned in this society that in order to get high anywhere, you have to put somebody else down. And that's why we don't put men down, we put women down.
Thank you.
Men taught us that. He taught us to be small, so we taught ourselves to be small. And if you try to be like a man, then you get put down as well too. Sorry, that is a like full-on Asian.
It's true
right there. And woman stigma. It's awful, because I love what you were saying earlier, Giselle, where you're like, I wonder like how I could ever get that kind of confidence that you exude. I love that you're saying that, because a lot of times with my clients, I get told the opposite of like, it was really scary to talk to you. You're kind of an intimidating person because you just make parenting look so easy and like everything's all okay. I was like, cool. And I have like ADHD and PTSD that I go to therapy once a week for. Like, I don't really see what you see. I think that goes to show you how much unlearning you have to do about why you put these standards on yourself to be low. Like, who told you that narrative that you have to be a small person and that you're invaluable as a mom, as a wife, as all of that? And that goes so much deeper. And that's the root, again, the good and rooted parent. You need to find that root to figure out why your parenting skills aren't where they are. The reason why nothing's moving and you feel like you're in the cycle of like, I feel like I'm guilting myself because I yelled at my kid, and now I feel like I need to get that out somehow because this feels really icky. That's your body telling you, I don't feel safe right now. And I don't have a space for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Why does that feel so scary to just say, I don't feel safe right now? Okay. What can we do about it? We can build that safety net. Maybe that means talking to you guys about it. Maybe it means talking to your husband about it. And maybe that means making time for you to say, all right, I think this means I need to have a bath night and just kind of come back to myself because I don't really feel good right now. And I don't want to, like, this is taking a lot of my energy.
Yeah.
So the second part of the question is, I I think people are allowed to celebrate their wins. Like if they had a seamless pregnancy, cool. I'm glad that you had a seamless pregnancy, but please don't put me down because my pregnancy was shitty. Like allow me that space to say I had a shitty pregnancy. And that makes me feel really good to be able to tell you this. And my follow-up to that is maybe that person who posted something perfect is not the person that you talk to about that. Maybe you say me being able to vent to my safe spaces about when I don't feel good is where I'm going to feel better. Why do I need to go to this person who only posts about all the positive things? That tells you a lot about what's going on in their life, that it's really hard for them to accept when it's the normal everyday stuff, when they look ugly, when they wake up at 6 o'clock and we all got the wrinkles. Like I look on that and say, you're human too. And maybe you're just not the human that I share my sacred emotions with. And that's okay with me because I also have my people that make me feel safe when I'm feeling shitty.
Right.
That's okay with me. That makes me a better mom, that I know where my safe spaces are and I can honor that every single time because those people will make me feel better.
You know what? I agree with what you're saying. Also, you know how you were saying, where Giselle was saying, you're such a confident mom and da 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 da. Like, I feel like, you know, when people make those comments, it's because I have very, very practiced of who I let inside my space and my energy, because nobody knows the hardships that I have, because all they see is, oh, you're this and you've done this and you're a single mom and you did whatever, but they don't see the in between. And I think this is why the podcast does exist, because Giselle and I want to show whatever the in between is. Like, it's not fucking perfect. Like I always tell people, like, and some people just think I'm a complete bitch because I don't say anything, or I'm just like, no, I've unlearned everything that was taught to me and all the shitty things people have said that I couldn't do, or this, or what the expectation was. There's no more expectation. And it's just funny because I still, I've never told my mom, I don't even tell my mom I loved her. I don't tell my siblings I love them. Do you know who I tell that I love like daily? Is Giselle. I tell her how much I love her all the time. I tell my son, and he always tells me every time we get off the phone is, okay, love you, bye, mom. Because tomorrow or whatever, I always tell people, you don't know what tomorrow brings. And I'm going to tell the people that I love them. And it used to be weird when I would tell Giselle that I'd love her because it was always constant, but it's like a second thing, especially when we're both having a hard day, is sometimes all I need is, hey, I love you. That's it. I don't fucking care what you went through. And I'm just like, okay, I'm good. I'm going to ride and coast those things. Like, why is it so hard in our culture to tell, you know, I want to teach my kid that it is okay to say you love somebody. It's weird because I have a hard time, even like the current significant or partner that I have, like I have a hard time. And I always tell him, like this, I have problems with affection. I have problems with this. And I can't, like, I always, just because sometimes they feel like they're rejected because I don't, it's not. I still have a lot of unlearning to do on that side of it. Cause I'm like, oh, people are watching, don't touch me. Like, it's just such a weird, like, why is it that, you know, it's hard for us to show that kind of emotion as color versus, you know, like, you know, a Caucasian woman, you know, because we all grew up differently. Maybe I don't know. Am I wrong?
No, you're not at all. The reason why I made this program is because I got really frustrated with white women on Instagram being like, this is how you do it. And this is how you do it. And this is how you apply it. Look, you're a good mom, which I was like, I'm sorry. We did not have 20 generations of emotional stability and then financial stability and then housing stability and then placement stability. We didn't have any of that. We were all in survivor mode while you guys benefited on the backs of us. So though we all live in the same generation today, our mindset is still like 10 generations back because no one has ever unlearned any of this. No one has ever taken a minute to be like, wait a minute, maybe I don't feel good shaming myself today. Maybe that's a thing I want to stop. Maybe I wonder what happens if I stop telling on myself all these negative things, how that benefits me as how I show up for my family. because my family is important to me.
Mhm.
No one's ever had that conversation.
Do you
Like,
get challenged by Caucasian women of what your teachings are? Like, are they
I do, because a lot of times
you're full of shit? Like,
I do. And I always say, you know what I get presented with a lot is, well, you're teaching the same thing I am. And I was like, no, I don't.
Not
because
really. No. Yeah.
My clients that I take on that are mothering themselves is because they are literally healing from generational trauma that never had any kind of access to therapy. Who were the kids that got to go to school for therapy? White kids. Who are the doctors that we see today? White kids. You don't see Asians. You don't see any of that. And even of the Asians, they're like the 1%. So if we're at 1% right now in 2022, it's going to take a couple more thousand years before we're like 50%. And that's honest truth right there. And during that many layers of generations moving forward, it starts with moments like this, where we're having intentional conversations about seeing the rawness of motherhood, really talking about the cultural dissection of it all, really talking about what varies from American life and Asian life, and then really being able to have honest conversations from one Asian woman to the other to say, how are we moving our generation forward? Gently, lovingly, in a way that shows affection, that means it's a good thing and not a means of weakness.
Yeah. And, you know, when I heard about what you were, when you reached out to us and told us a little bit more about what you're doing, I was so relieved, because you've obviously might have heard of Big Little Feelings, right? And no, I'm not knocking on them or anything. It's just a lot of their stuff. I follow them, and it's like, okay, that is way easier said than done. I cannot do that. And, you know, it just makes me feel like shit all over again, right? And so the question I want to ask is, so you were talking about what was it? Unmothering or unlearning
Mothering the mother.
Yeah. So it all stems with the mom and having to get over her own generational trauma, like you said. And it's funny because Har was saying, like, oh yeah, Ava won't remember. Hi. Oh, she's so cute. Ava won't remember like what you yelled about, but okay, you're a mother of a daughter, and you've seen Encanto, right? Like a couple million times probably. So the other day Ava was watching it, and the part where the abuela was yelling at Mirabel, she goes, Mom, I'm Mirabel and you're abuela because you're always mad at me. And deep down inside I was like crushed. I was like, okay, I'm not going to react. I'm just going to be like, what? It was so hard. I was like, well, why do you think that? And she said, because you're always mad at me and you're always yelling at me. And I was like, I'm really sorry if you think that I always yell at you, and I'm going to try really hard to, you know, do what I try to teach you, and like, you know, take a deep breath or whatever. But when she said that, I was fucking like mangled. Sorry, my language. I was mangled on the inside.
You're fine.
Okay. Yeah, I was just so crushed, but I was trying not to let it show, because she's not wrong. I do lose my cool all the time, and I'm not going to tell her she's wrong. I'm not going to show her that I'm mad that she said that, because I'm really glad she shared that with me. But that all goes back to like how I am trying not to mess her up, so to speak. And I think because now we're living in this world where we have so many different resources, I personally feel like I'm bombarded with like a plethora of different resources that say different things. So I read once that like the first 6 years of a child's life is when their brain is actually like developing the most, and who you're shaping them to be is pretty much setting the stage for how they're going to be for the rest of their life. So because my daughter's 5 and she thinks that way about me, this is why I have such low self-esteem when it comes to parenting, because, you know, she's reaching that age, and I'm just trying to make sure I'm doing everything in my power to do right by her and not have her think that I'm just this yelling monster. But like, she still thinks that sometimes.
How do you come back to the concept of you being mad with her or you yelling with her? Do you have any follow-up questions, or do you guys have those conversations where you're like, I was really mad, that was my responsibility, not yours, but let's talk about that, because I think you felt that it was your responsibility. I don't want that to happen again. next time I'm going to make sure that when I'm mad, I'm going to step out of the room because that's not fair to you. Having those tools to communicate like that is how you're not going to fuck her up, because you're human. You're going to yell. You're going to scream. You're going to put hard limits. You're sometimes just going to put them on the screen because you're so pissed off. That's all valid. You're allowed to do that. That is gentle parenting because you're human. That will happen. You're not going to fuck them up because you yelled. You're going to fuck them up because you didn't follow up with them on where your big emotions happened and how it related to them. Their biggest concern is, are you going to love me? Or is it my problem? Is it my fault? Because their brains don't have the capacity to manipulate you to be like, I don't like you today. I don't like you. I hate you. Like, those aren't things that their brains are capable to understand. But those associations will start to build if you're not having those healthy conversations when you follow up. And I think moms put a lot of pressure to say, I yelled at her Tuesday, didn't really say anything, and then I just kind of let it go. Well, in their heads, they know that mommy yelled and I must have done something, so I'm going to fix myself. That's where we stop that trap, because to them, they don't have a timeline of things, but to you, you do. Your timeline doesn't even matter anyway. So even if you yelled on Tuesday, you can come back Wednesday and have that conversation. You can come back Thursday, you can come back Friday, you can come back the next Tuesday and still say, how are you feeling about when mommy yelled at you last week? I don't feel good about that. I'm still thinking about it. Are you still thinking about it? That, having that tool to communicate that is how you're not going to fuck them up. Because when somebody else yells at them in the future, when they are an adult, they're not going to think it's their problem, and they're not going to like avoid it either. The thing with Asian culture is that we're not good with confrontation. See it as all negative things. We either run and hide, or we don't talk about it at all. That's still
Yeah.
The thing is, part of, if you want to apply gentle parenting, or like what Big Little that account, what they're also teaching is the ability to consent verbally. And to consent verbally also means to be able to have these hard conversations and know that they too are gentle and they too are respectful. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying, this is how I love you today, or this is how I show up with you today. There's nothing wrong with that. It's as simple as that when you have a confrontational moment too.
Right.
So obviously we do some snooping around. On your IG, you have a guide that says 5 things you don't need to be a good mom. Tell us, what are those 5 things?
I'm gonna pull it up here so that you can.
What you don't know, I'm just kidding. What you don't know, just kidding.
It's actually really simple. I'm gonna pull it up because I have so many things moving right now in my business. As you guys know, I also have like the podcast as well.
Yeah.
And our team is growing by adding 2 more team members.
Nice.
So I'm like, let me just go back to that.
You know what? I was totally joking about that. I'm like, I didn't even know my niece. Like, I'm just coming from, Giselle was sick, I was sick, and I was like, wait a minute, how old is my niece? I'm like, 4. I was like, oh, I'm gonna get condemned for this. Like, she just turned 5. Like, what the hell? But sometimes there's just so much shit, and it's totally okay. That's the point where I was just saying, like, we have to normalize it, because there's a lot of information that comes daily, and this thing sometimes doesn't shut off, and that's a problem for me and for Giselle too, because I can't sleep sometimes because I'm like, oh my God.
We're moms. We know everyone's schedule. We know everyone's routine. This is exactly what I say to moms, and they're like, I don't have time for your program. And I'm like, no. That's not time that you don't have, honey, because you are a mom. I know you're organized. I know you know everyone's routine. I know everybody, when you wake up for work, when you get home from work, and I know when you need to go grocery shopping. So it's not a matter of time, it's capability. Are you willing to permission yourself to have the capability to be a part of this program? Are you willing to work on it so that you can get the results to be just like me? Because if you're still following me 3 years out, and if you're listening to all my episodes and you're buying all of my merch, why are you spending so much energy there when you can get a program that's yours at your time, that you have access to at any point, that you can listen to on the go or on, at night, And it's something that's fun and easy that you can always go back to. And it's like niche little segments of learned lessons that, because they're so potent, I don't expect you to finish it in like a week or a month, because that's how well spoken and diligent the program is. Like personally, I think it's going to be about 3 to 6 months for you to finish my program, because not only are you learning, you're unlearning, and unlearning is a skill to have. And then you apply the skills, and then you interpret and then project that with your kids. That sequence, that's not taught with what white people are doing. White people are not doing that because they're not taking into any of those considerations that every single step of that is a skill to have.
Yeah.
That's not something as parents, we have the skills to do, especially as Asian women. So I'm going to go back to what you said there. So what are the 5 things you don't need to be a good mom? I said prior parenting experience, have all the money, daily shower, a clean house, and being overprotective. And I go into the depths of that as well too. I said prior parenting experience, because I feel like in the Asian community, especially with men, this is more so for the men, they feel like I have no emotions, so why would I be a good dad? And, well, because I haven't had that experience, I'm only going to teach what I know, which is to not have any emotions. Well, there's this thing called life and how kids always teach us the biggest lessons, whether we want to or not. So if your kids can teach you lessons, you can also choose to make better decisions and choose to have resources so that you can be a better parent. That doesn't go away at any point when you have your child. When you leave the hospital, that opportunity never goes away at all. And then the next one is have all the money. I don't like this culture where moms feel like they need to have the highest things, because quality is not on money. I would know that because my family, we are pretty well off and we do not have a name brand everything. If anything, it's the opposite. It's quality. Where does it come from? How long can I use it for? Does it match up with our insurance? Do I get more savings because it goes with my insurance? Those are the better mindset to have than to say, oh, I need to have the newest and the best toys for my kids in order for me to be a valid mom. As you guys both have expressed, your kids love you no matter what. They don't care what they have. They care that they have you. You are their biggest accessory. You are their biggest role model. You are the thing that they will look up to and look back on if you fuck them up or not. They're not going to say my best friend from 2nd grade. That alone, that statement tells you how much of an influence that you continue to have in your kids' life, of how happy they're going to be adjusting in this big, big world. They just need you. They don't need anything else. And then I said a daily shower. We try. Our kids thinking everything, and no mom likes to talk about that, but that's true. Like sometimes we're like, it's been a minute, but you still want me to cook you dinner? Sure. Okay. That's weird because I smell me and I don't smell good, but you must be fine with that. When you become a mom, self-care kind of goes out the window, and then it comes back, and then it goes out, and then it comes back in. And the thing is, that doesn't make us any less of a mom. If anything, it makes our kids crazier for us. I don't know. And then the last one is a clean house. One thing I've learned in being a mom, everything takes a routine. Okay. You're going to have a clean dining table, and the next it's going to be like shit for a month. Okay. At least it was cleaned a month ago. We need to drop this expectation of being full-time working moms and full-time housekeepers and full-time experts at everything, because in our kids' mind, no matter how old they are, we're still experts, whether we put those connotations on ourselves or not. And then the last word is be overprotective. You guys both have talked about this a lot today, about how you feel like there's this amount of anxiety of something bad is going to happen if it's not like this. And I want you to say, who told me that? Who told me that was true? Why do I keep telling myself that's true? Why do I make sure that I'm the gatekeeper of what is fear and what is love? Because I feel like that's so important. I feel like as moms, we somehow forget that we have so much love, and love does not mean that fear needs to exist. Fear keeps us protective, which is fine, but so does love. Love is also protective too. So those are the 5 things you don't need to be a good mom.
That's amazing.
Oh my God. Well, for anybody who's listening out there, make sure you sign up to our newsletters because you're going to get this. Because I was actually trying to see it and I was like, oh, I should sign up for this newsletter. And you're actually right. We can absorb, like you said, there's so many resources now. Even like 10 years ago from when I was raising my son, I actually didn't have any of those resources. And now there's so many, and it just sometimes people are like, oh, you're wrong, or this contradicts to that. And the biggest thing that we teach here on our podcast is it doesn't fucking matter which one that you have. Just remember, you be kind to other moms, be kind to whomever, because that might not fucking work. It might not work. What you're doing, what I'm doing. I'm Asian, you're Caucasian, you're Vietnamese, you're Chinese, you're whatever. Like, but there are very, very, very much similarities when it comes to parenting. But at the end of the day is, I think, I don't want to call people shitty parents, but it's almost like we do teach our kids to act and do certain things. And it's just like, if you are shitty to other people, they're going to see that. And that's one thing that is not, I don't think is a cultural difference. It's a matter of like teaching your kids that. Anyways.
Respect either way. It's you
agreed.
Your son hasn't even seen that. Like, what is respect and what isn't, whether that's family or not. Like, he comes back to you and it's like, I don't really know about this, Mom. And you're like, yeah, I don't know either. And you're right. That's uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable, which means you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you guys have any other questions?
I do. We're going to just segue a little bit into a couple of things.
The spicy stuff.
The spicy stuff. We always
we
like
have
the spicy stuff.
My podcast is all about the spicy stuff.
Awesome. We have 10 minutes. So I want to dive a little deeper into your spicy side.
Yeah. So on your podcast, episode 10, you had one, it's called Let's Talk About Sex, Baby. On the scale of priorities, where do you think intimacy with your significant other, like where do you think that lies on the priority scale? And the reason why I ask this is a lot of our male audience, like we want to touch base on this, but a lot of our male audience sends us messages because they feel like the intimacy in their relationship has always fallen last on their priorities or non-existent after having children. For women or for you, where is the intimacy lies and how important is that?
I would say it's a 10. 10 is that it's very important. Because men and women have intimacy very differently. I tell my husband all the time, I was like, I don't always want to fuck you. I just want to talk to you. I just want you to hear my heart. I just want you to hear my concern for the day. Or like, can you just give me a snack? I just want a snack. Like, that's my act of intimacy. Yeah. And even when we have kids, intimacy could be if you're breastfeeding, your husband is always making sure that you have a snack full of cart for all your breastfeeding stuff. So your chapstick, your water bottle, your double the snacks, double the diapers for the baby, and making sure that you have a phone charger. Like, small acts like that is also intimate too. Like, that is the shit that turns us women on. Yeah, that's why dad bods are a thing, because it's like, I know how hard you work for that belly. I like that belly. Let's come over here, like, keep that belly growing because I like that. That tells me you're domesticated. That tells me you care about the house. That tells me like you're good to your woman. Like, that's the way we see that. Women are such nurturers, and but like, whether you have a kid or not, like we're all nurturers, and we love to see men get like that, to see their softer side. Like, something about that just sends off like electric shots for our I've seen this for myself. I've seen this with my mom clients. I've seen this also with my therapist too, when I'm like, is this normal that I'm really turned on that he just did all the dishes that I left for like 3 days? Like, I just wanted him to bend me over right there. Like,
oh my God.
I'll be right back, guys. I want to show you something that I found when I was moving. Hang on.
And it was just funny because we've been seeing all this TikTok where men are like, they're like washing dishes or they're like cleaning the toilets. And then you see like the women just getting all hot and bothered. And actually it's true because those are the things that you're alleviating or taking out of her day. And it's like, okay, baby, you just clean the toilet. We can fuck now. Let's do it because I don't need to do it. You just gave me some time. So I feel like I totally get why.
Yeah, especially because we carry so much of that mental load. You guys just said it yourselves. Like as a woman, we know the routines for everybody in the house, okay, whether we like to or not. And if they take that on and take it off our chest, it's like, of course, now I actually have time for you, because as much as I love you and I want to share with you that space, I'm sorry, our kids are always going to come first, and everything among our kids are more than just physical. It's mental and it's emotional. And then it relays on us and our own mental space, because a lot of times as moms, we put ourselves on the back burner. As much as our husbands or our spouses or our partners would like us to be there, they're not having to share that mental load that we do either. And especially in the Asian culture, like men don't get that like at all. That's still a shift that I see that they can grow in for themselves. If there was like a male version of me for that, I would love to have them on my podcast too, because that is important work. That is the change that's going to need to happen.
So I wanted to show you guys what I got as a gift when I had a baby. It's called Porn for New Moms. So it's just like pages like this, and this says, now remember, it's my turn to do the midnight feeding, so don't get up. And it totally
so cute.
Right. And it's just, yeah, you're right. Exactly. It's like something about that makes women more attracted to the man. Yeah. So I guess what I want to ask next is, how do you personally, you and your hubbies, keep things spicy?
Well, we have a lot of sex. We've always been like that. We've been with each other for like 10 years. Sex has never been a problem for us. He does it just fine, and I am happy to comply. But like in those first couple of months, like we've also shifted in our relationship, in our love language, in how we receive for ourselves and also how we receive for each other, as our roles have shifted into parents. So what that means is, like, for me, for Parker, it's really hard for us to have family dinner and let that be intimacy time, because he's interrupted by my 3-year-old all the time. He can't full on tell me everything. Like, to him, like that's really disruptive to him to get in the zone. He likes to take his time. Okay, ladies. And so he really likes when we do like date nights, because then he gets all of me. And like, he's just like, then I get my Philantha, I get my baby girl. Like, I can tell you everything that's on my heart. And I know I don't have to put that parent head for him when it comes to just everyday living. Me, I'm always like, just do the dishes. I'm okay with that. You know, you might get some later tonight. Like, that's me. Mine is acts of service and words of affirmation. So especially with him, it's just like, a lot of times my role is to say, can you just tell me I look gorgeous today? And then you like my lipstick. That makes me feel better. And just him saying it back to me, I'm like, I might bend you over later, because that I really like that you said what I told you to say. And being my own entrepreneur and my own boss too, like, I have to delegate a lot, and it's nice when I don't have to put that hat on. So when it comes to intimacy,
oh my God, do you know, that's like my thing. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I like when you just said that, is people are just like, how do you not want that, Harleen? I was like, you make decisions all fucking day, and sometimes you just don't. You need, like, when I say I need a man, like, I need a man to just make the decision, because I can't, because at the end of the day, that's just like such minor things. And I'm like, I don't fucking care. I'm happy to just comply whatever you want. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's exactly how I feel. Cause it's like, I get that everybody loves that I'm a boss and people are glad that I'm their boss, but like, I don't always want to be bossed around. And I just need my husband sometimes to be like, this is what we're having for dinner. I'm doing the cleanup. This is what we're doing after. This is the activity and bedtime. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, I will fuck you tonight. You didn't even need to say it. I would be happy. Like, right now, do we need a bathroom break? Like, do we need Disney Plus on for like 10 minutes? Like, I love when he does stuff like that, because there's not a lot of people in my life that like doesn't see me with the boss hat on.
Yeah.
Very refreshing.
Yeah. And that's really good to hear too, that, take note, guys, if there any men are listening.
Wash a couple dishes.
Yeah. And you'll get some for sure.
So we'll get some. So sorry, we are almost like literally out of time. So,
Yes.
but before we go, I just want to thank you so much. We could literally talk for 5 hours.
Yes.
Like there's just so much more, and we'll be sure to get you back on here. We have to. But before we go, we want to ask you, what can people expect from season 2 on the Necessary Break podcast?
So for season 2, it's all about mama health. And I feel like as moms, we know what the hell that is. We just don't like to do it, especially working out. But this goes beyond just working out and talking to like your doctor and asking like the stereotypical, like what happens in pregnancy, what happens in postpartum. This goes beyond the scenes of like what they actually do, what they love about their job, who they are as people. On my podcast, I also have a segment where we talk about different kinds of confessions, and you really get to hear who they are as people, who they are as moms, like their funny moments, who like their mom girl chats, like being able to have those vulnerable moments that builds those invaluable connections that allows people to laugh. And that is the necessary break.
That's awesome. I can't wait. Looking forward to more of your stuff. I love the stuff that you're putting out, and just keep doing what you're doing, because the world needs more moms like you, and moms like you in their corner. Because I for sure, I took a lot away from this episode. So thank you so much again, Philantha. Don't forget to follow Philantha on IG. It's at The Necessary Break. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up, and just be kind out there. And remember to love yourself even on the hardest days. Bye, guys.